Good morning. I'm Ahmed Elnaggar and this is Monday Legal. My guest for today is Suraya Turk, the managing partner of Legal Circle. Good morning, Suraya.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure to have you. Now I introduce you very briefly, but I would like that you introduce yourself. But before I do that,
Sure.
I would like you to tell me what's your morning drink. Do you drink coffee?
Actually, surprisingly, I don't.
Wow.
I don't drink coffee at all.
Sure you're a lawyer?
Yes. Yeah, but it's only because my stomach can't really handle the coffee these days. But otherwise, I'd absolutely love to drink it if I had a choice. So it's not by choice that I don't drink.
Okay. Well, what's your morning drink then? What do you do in the office if you don't drink coffee?
I know. Well, my morning drink, surprisingly, is now water. I have to start the day with water, and then within the hour, have to have something to eat. So I'm just on a bit of a strict regime for dietary requirements. But that's the only way that's the only reason I'm an anomaly at the moment.
Okay, so no offense for coffee.
No, I absolutely love it. I just can't drink it.
Good.
Yeah.
Suraya, I would like that you a little bit introduce yourself and tell me and the audience about your start in the legal field. What's your background? Where did you study, for example, and how did you end up in Dubai?
Yeah, okay. So I've been a lawyer for almost 20 years now, just shy of that. I studied back in Australia. So I'm Australian, born and raised with a Lebanese heritage, but I went to university in Sydney and I studied law. And law at the time was pretty much a no-brainer. For me, it was like, I went down the list at the time of all the different professions that you could be. And I remember thinking to myself, it was either going to be psychology or law. And so I put the two together. So I actually did a double degree where I did social science and majored in psychology and criminology. And then I combined all that with law as well. So that's how I sort of started my career. And then I was a prosecutor for the first 7 years of my career back in Australia, working at both the local and federal level of government in prosecution. And so a lot of it was advocacy, courtroom drama. But of course, then life has a way of twisting and turning and I guess putting you in a different direction when you least expect it. And that's what it did about 11 years ago. And I ended up being in Dubai. And I remember when I landed here, I was like, oh, okay. So prosecution, my Arabic's not great. Yeah. Went to the court a few times. I'm like, not going to cut it. And then the good thing was prior to prosecution, I did have some corporate commercial law. So I thought, okay, well, corporate commercial also was something that I could do quite easily. And I worked as well in a lot of in my prosecution within white collar crime. So I had to understand a lot of the corporate commercial dynamics and what some of the white collar criminals were doing in that space. I'm like, okay, it's quite easy to transfer. And so then I moved into that. So for the past 11 years, while practicing here in the UAE, I was, doing very much corporate commercial, the typical lawyering in that space. But about 6 years ago, I could see that the landscape was changing, right? It was not so much anymore bigger conglomerates that were setting up here. It wasn't all about, a corporate commercial in a multinational corporation anymore. There was starting to be lots of startups. There was lots of, young people who were moving into business and innovating. And of course, the government put out their direction and innovation and digital, the landscape and technology. And I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. This is definitely a space I don't know as much as I'd like to about. And then that really started the entrepreneurial journey for me and moving into the startup and the landscape and understanding what was happening globally within the startup and entrepreneurial space. And eventually I find myself practicing, private equity and venture capital and really immersing myself in that to the point where that was what I was just doing day and night and have been for the past 6 years.
Wow.
So it's been a really fun journey, yeah.
So the past 6 years are with Legal Circle?
So the past 6 years have been with Legal Circle,
and
yes.
Before that?
And before that, I was working in a few different law firms here. So I worked in a local law firm and I also worked in a German international law firm which had set up an office here in the UAE. Yeah, so I was doing corporate commercial with them for some time, and then moved into my own practice and Legal Circle and focusing really on a niche, I guess, a niche startup and entrepreneurs,
So tell us more about this niche. Like your clients are all entrepreneurs or startups that already exist abroad and they want to come and have a base in the UAE?
Pretty much, yeah. So we have a mixed bag of clients. So a lot of them, or the bulk of them, I would say, are from the UAE and startups and founders who have been like ex-Google or ex-Microsoft or, one of these big names, and now have a really innovative idea and have decided to start up, and they're onto something which is fantastic and great. And so we help them through the journey of, the incorporation and setup all the way through to, if they were to go to IPO. And then the other part of, I guess, the portfolio, you could say, are clients that come from abroad. They may have set up there, but now are expanding and scaling across, for example, the Middle East. And then we help them to scale and build into the MENA region. Yeah.
One of the things that is very common for entrepreneurs and startups is to make mistakes. Right? And I think that's how
that goes without saying. They have to.
They have to do that to learn. What are the most common mistakes that you feel like startups, especially the ones who start already outside of the UAE and they kind of want to come and relocate here? What is the main mistakes from their experiences abroad and when they come here to the UAE they make?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So what we see with those startups or entrepreneurs that are coming from outside and then going to be scaling here is often they have a different expectation, or nobody's properly helped them to manage their expectation. Like, for example, they might come to the UAE and they're like, okay, well, I would just want to set up shop now, and they think it's going to be done overnight. And it's as easy as, going online, making a payment of a small amount, because I get this all the time from, those that come out from the UK. Oh, but in the company's house, it's just £1,000, pounds, and I can get to set up, and I set up overnight. And they have to understand that it's a little bit different here in the UAE. In the UAE, there's multiple jurisdictions. We've got obviously, the mainland versus the free zone. So where to set up? Why would you set up there? What are the advantages of setting up there? So just understanding what the local nuances, even of just setting up. And then of course, there's the nuances of even doing business here. It's quite different. The UAE, when I say different, I don't say this in a bad way at all. I say it in a good way, but it's a melting pot of so many people from all over the world that have a different way of doing business. And so, when you come here, depending on the area that you're in, or the business and activities that you're in, that looks a little bit different for different people. And so again, how do you do business here? How do you, for example, if you're dealing with government, how do you deal with private sector? How do you even land the contracts? What are the expectations of how to negotiate the contract? Because the landscape is so different, and it's still very much about relationships and about trust and about building that. And that doesn't happen overnight. So if you've come from overseas and you've just come to the UAE and you want to hit the ground running, I mean, that's great. The ambition is great. The energy is great, but then you have to manage the expectation that it may take a little bit longer than what you expect, or there might be some nuances that you've not considered that are unique to this landscape that you've got to have to navigate, which takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, absolutely. You did practice a little bit in Australia, as you said, with the prosecution, and you did some time as well in the corporate
commercial before that, yes.
How did this switching happen, and let's say, how long did it take you to actually switch your work style and your brain into the UAE in a civil law jurisdiction that is completely different than in Australia?
Totally.
How long did it take you?
Yeah, so look, I have to say, to feel really confident in my own sort of knowledge, skills, and ability to give clients, the level of care and attention and professionalism and advice that I wanted to, it took a good 2 years, because I had to really rethink and relearn, not so much rethink, but relearn, because I guess as lawyers, the skill is there no matter where you practice around the globe. The skill of lawyering is exactly the same. However, the knowledge base was a little bit different. But the good thing was, Australia is common law. And so I knew common law very well. And the good thing in the UAE is that the DIFC and the ADGM is based on common law, although it's more closely aligned with the UK laws. UK and Australia are very similar anyway. And so really it was just tweaking the knowledge with the common law. But from a civil law perspective, that was quite different. So I really had to start learning the knowledge base again. But it didn't take very long. Look, I'd say it took me a good 2 years, but I mean, at the end of those 2 years, I could fairly say that I, knew the real estate laws, knew the employment laws, knew corporate commercial laws. I mean, to the point where I could recite articles in the different laws and talk about the application. And I guess I was learning on the job. And when you learn on the job, it's always, it fast tracks as well, your knowledge, because you get to go, all right, well, this is what I know, and you're learning within a team of experts, which I had the benefit of doing when I was working in the law firms. And then you had real life cases that you had to now apply your knowledge to. And so I think that really helped me to really update my knowledge in terms of UAE laws, and then bring the skills that I already had and together apply that in a real life situation. And I think by 2 years I was like, okay, I've got this. Yeah.
And after 11 years, I believe that right now you advising your clients coming from common law background is much easier, and probably you have an advantage over other lawyers who are coming only or studied only with the civil law or practice only with the civil law system, that you might think you have some advantage over the other professionals when you deal with clients coming from the common law system.
Exactly. Well, that's it. So I had obviously a lot of training in common law before coming, and then now over the 11 years I've had with the civil law, putting those together, I do feel like I have now a good and very broad but also in-depth knowledge of both. And so regardless of where the client wants to set up or do business, I can say, well, okay, this is the advantages, this is the disadvantages, this is what it might look like for you if you progress this way in this jurisdiction or in this way. And the good thing, obviously, with practicing here in the other law firms, I did a few years in a litigation law firm as well. So I don't only just see it from a consultancy or advisory perspective, but I could see that, in the case of a dispute and where things were to go wrong, what that journey or what that process looks like. And I think, God's the best of planners, right? Because I didn't imagine that this is what my career would look like. But when I look back, I think, wow, yes, there's so many, I guess, facets to learning and practicing law, and probably having the advantage of practicing and learning here, the multi-jurisdictions, has given me definitely an advantage and made law a bit more fun.
Yes. I know that you advocate, you're a public speaker, and you do a lot of speeches, especially when it comes to advising entrepreneurs. And I think you have the speciality of advising tech startups, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, how do you help startups in coming to the UAE, or introducing them to this jurisdiction?
Yeah, so you're right in saying that the public speaking is, I think, just an add-on to what I do in terms of law, and I've just done so much of it that now I do get asked to speak globally, and I talk about entrepreneurship, and I talk about startup, and I do talk about what it takes to set up and scale and really grow successfully here in the UAE. And what's my advice? Was your question my advice to startups and entrepreneurs?
Like,
Sorry,
how can you help them? How can you help the tech startups to come and start up or set up shop in the UAE? What's your journey there?
How can you help them with their journey? So essentially we help startups and entrepreneurs with their journey from the outset. So, and when I say the outset, it's from incorporation and setting up and knowing, where to set up, because, as we were speaking about earlier, the UAE actually has so many jurisdictions within one country, and it's got, over 45 free zones now, and then there's the mainland. And so when a startup is first deciding where to set up, they're often really confused. Okay, well, I've got so many options. What do I do? And so we really help them identify what the best options for them, and why they would choose to set up in the particular free zone or in a mainland. So that's the start of the journey. It always starts with licensing, your activities, and making sure that you can actually do those activities in the UAE legally. And then we look at, what are the different areas that they need now to help them scale? Now, typically with a startup technology company, after they've set up license, after they've started, say, their product, maybe they've got a little bit of investment, or they might be bootstrapping, but then at some point in time, they need to start fundraising. And so typically within the first 12 months of their life cycle, they will go to raise funds. And that journey lasts for quite so many years, depending on the technology. And so we help them throughout that journey of pre-seed fundraising all the way to Series A, B, and C. And that journey is a long one, and it's constantly, it's one that you have to be constantly planning for. So they might raise in the first 12 months, but then they're already planning for the next raise, and what does that look like? And so that entire journey. Now, as they're fundraising, they've also got to scale, and they also have to grow. And so we help them through the growth stages of hiring. So there's, employment contracts, and negotiating those with your staff. There might be vendor contracts, because now your product's gone to market. You have to, generate some revenue. So whether that's a service, for example, if it's, SaaS, it could be a platform, or it might be a technology or product or AI. So how do they actually monetize that product or offering or service? And we help them through that process with drafting all their contracts and negotiating that for them. And then really it's just as they scale, they might now need to expand to other jurisdictions. So we have partners across jurisdictions that they I want to expand to. So we look at how then do we help them to set up there. So I mean, typically with a startup's journey, may start in Dubai, but then they look at Saudi Arabia being, you know, one of the bigger markets to play in, if we want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And so how do they scale there? How do we get them to go there? And then lots of little things along the way that they'll need to navigate, they'll need to circumvent, they'll need to find ways through, and it's really helping them through that journey. And then of course, the more successful startups now post, you know, Series A, B or C are either looking at a merger or acquisition or going to IPO, and we help them with that as well. So really it's the full life cycle of the startup and entrepreneur.
It's not only legal advisory.
No,
You're
it's a lot.
doing everything for startups.
Yeah, it's really the entire journey. I mean, just yesterday I sat with one of the startups and he was like, I don't think you just do the lawyering bit. I think you're also a bit of a psychologist.
Yes.
Because you really have to see there, and sometimes you've got to tell that startup, no, that's not what this is going to look like.
Yeah.
Or I know you desperately want this to happen, but you're just not there yet. Hold steady. Let's do this first. Do that second. Do that third.
Yeah.
You know, take it in stages. I know you want to get to number 10, but you're here now. So just, you could stay where you are now, and then let's take it in stages. And so often I find myself or telling them to calm down. It's okay. Don't worry. I mean, because there's so many things in the startup and entrepreneurial journey.
Yes.
I mean, you go from hiring and then you realize, okay, I've just hired somebody that's not a fit for the team and now I need to fire. Okay, great. But the next thing you've got a claim by the, you know, Ministry of Labor saying you've terminated this person and now you need to pay X amount. And as a startup, it's like, you know, they get nervous, they get worried. It's something that they didn't expect on their trajectory. It was more like, I just needed to hire. They weren't the right person. Now I need to fire. But with that comes so many things, you know, or I've gone into a contract. The contract was a bit bigger than what I, you know, anticipated I could actually handle at this point in time. And so now you're in breach of a contract and now you're negotiating to get out of the contract.
Yeah.
But that could be $100,000 that you don't have. So, and so there's so many things along the way that will come up that you can't plan for necessarily. And so, it's about how do we take them through the entire journey and get them to see it through to the end. Because it's not easy. It gets tough, doesn't it?
Working with entrepreneurs in general, I believe it's not a very easy job. But I will ask you about entrepreneurs, because it seems like you've worked with many of them.
Yeah. Well, I think we're at 450 the last time I counted.
Wow, that's
so
a great
plenty
number.
of entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Tell me about the most common trait you will find in an easy to work with entrepreneur and the opposite. They're not hard to deal with.
I was going to say that. I don't know if there's an easy to work with entrepreneur.
Okay.
I don't know.
None of them.
No. But when I say that, it's not that, again, it's not that they're not easy to work with. They are. It's just the entrepreneurs who really know where they're going and what they're driving and are so passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Wants everything done yesterday. And so they're on the go, 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 go. It's always like, where's that document? Well, you just asked me to draft the document, so you're not going to get it in this moment. They wanted it yesterday, you know, or we're scaling, like let's open up tomorrow. Whereas it's fantastic. I understand you're doing great here. Now you want to set up in Saudi. But the reality of that is it's going to take 3 to 4 months to set up there. So we can start today, but, you know, and so it's constantly about managing expectations, communicating and managing expectations, communicating and managing expectations. And of course, weathering the storm with them. So, and it's interesting, but like when you're going through that journey, it's almost like you're a part of it. If they don't close that raise or they're just about to close the raise, you're just as anxious as they are, you know, for me. So, so I'm always sort of on my toes and jumping from the one entrepreneur to the other. But it's fun, right? And it keeps you going and it keeps you, I guess, mentally agile until it gets tiring.
Yes. What is the favorite jurisdiction when it comes to technology startups, for example? Because you've worked with many of them. I think we work with many jurisdictions here inside the UAE, out of the 45 different options that we have, and maybe in the region as well, because you work with Saudi, Qatar, and other countries. What is the main jurisdiction that you advise startup in technology to go to?
Absolutely. So from an operational perspective, the startup has many choices, and it all depends on what the business activity is. So for example, if you're going to be if you're in fintech, then I advise always ADGM or the DIFC, right? That's the, you know, financial sectors. That's where the DFSA and ADGM financial regulatory body is, and you need to be governed by those bodies. And ideally, I think to be in an ecosystem with other fintech players, they're the two jurisdictions I'd go to. Of course, if you're in a platform, if you're in e-commerce, you don't necessarily need to go to those, and you've got multiple options available to you. You might go to, example, to Maidan, you might go to Media City, you might go to In5. There's some of the common ones that early stage startup might go to. Then you have other technology startups, and it depends. When they come to me and they say, oh, we've got a lot of government contracts. Okay, what do those contracts looks like? If you're going to be dealing with government, then perhaps you need to be in the mainland somewhere. So from an operational perspective, it will look different for startup to startup depending on the activity and business type.
Yeah.
However, in a startup life cycle, I always recommend that they have to have a dual structure. And what I mean by that is you have to have your operational license where your employees, your staff, your business activities, your contracts are all housed in this operational entity. But a dual structure looks like you have to have a holding company above it. And the holding company is very important for when you're raising funds, because you might have investors that come from outside jurisdictions and they want to be in a common law jurisdiction. Yeah. And so I typically encourage startups to have a holding company in a common law jurisdiction. And obviously within the UAE, there's the two, which is the ADGM and the DIFC. If they want to go outside, then that's fine too. But it might be the BVI, it might be Cayman, it might be Delaware, Singapore, or somewhere else that is also common law. But if we, restricting or limiting, I guess, the answer to the UAE, then I'd say the holding company to be in either the ADGM or the DIFC. And so that's, I know I think you wanted it to be a straightforward answer, but there's always different nuances to be taking into consideration.
Totally relate to this answer, and I feel that you just said what I always say. And sometimes when the client come to me and say, "Hey, I would like to open a company in Ras Al Khaimah," I just tell him sorry, you don't tell me where you are going. You have to tell me what you want to do.
What is it you're trying to achieve?
Exactly. Don't come to me with the solution, because that's my job. I need to understand what I want to do, because then I will tell you it's possible or not.
Well, that's exactly it. So I face the same thing so many times. You'll have a startup that's just done a bit of research or spoken to some other people, and they've said, you need to go and do this. Yeah. And so they come to you and say, this is what we want to do. That's all well and good. But as you're navigating with them the entrepreneurial journey, you say, well, you picked, RAC, or you came to me with that particular license. Why did you come with that license? Yeah. Oh, because at the time somebody told us. What people tell you and what you think you need may not be what you need, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so this is where sometimes I have to tell the startup and client, you just need to trust that I will help you and give you the best advice, but don't tell me what it is that you need and want. Yeah. Tell me what it is that you want to achieve. Exactly. And I will tell you what you need.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because you may not need to have a holding company today, but you need to have your operational first. Even there are considerations like budget requirements. I mean, everything you do is going to cost you something. And so for you, do you need everything today, or can you do it in stages? Can I do something today and do something in the next year? Even when it comes, for example, trademarking, do you need to set up a company and then go ahead and trademark everything? Or can you just set up the company and trademark once you've built a name and then, some revenues and developing some traction and maybe now talking to investors? When do you actually need to do different things that you want to do is also a crucial part of the longevity of the business, because you can burn your money quite easily, right? So,
does it happen to you as well? Because this happens to me a few times. Is that I'm dealing with a startup that I establish the company, and we do some steps with them, different contracts and so on, and they disappear for about 6 months, and then they come back with a problem.
Totally, all the time.
It's very common.
Oh, so many times. So, and if they think it's important but not urgent, they'll come to you, ask you for information. And of course, the consultation with me is always free, or with the team. So we give them a whole heap of information. They often go away. They can go away maybe for 6 months, even 2 years, come back and say, we need your help now. And they come back with a mess.
Huge problem.
It's like, oh, wow.
Like, why didn't you ask me?
You've progressed to that. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, and you've done this along the way. Oh, wow. Okay. None of the documents speak to each other.
Yeah.
None of the the subsidiaries, for example, even owned or have any, there's no story. The story is not coherent.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but we've got some investment from here, we've got some investment for there. Okay, and what did you promise to them? And it's even like, you know what they promised to the investors, they have to deliver. But yet they've got this documentation. Sometimes they don't even know where. Yeah, we did sign something that said that.
In the car
Yeah.
somewhere.
I'm sure we'll ask somebody from the team, but when we did that deal, we signed a document. Can't remember what the document says. Can't remember what they have to deliver and what they've promised. And it's like, okay. And the problem with that is now you've got to backtrack.
Yeah.
You've got to go back to when they started, and then to get a really good view and understanding of where they're at, you pretty much have to go through and dig and, you know, review and ask questions to start now to put the pieces all together. And that obviously costs time and money. But they often say, but we don't have time or money, but we want the job done. Now, how do we navigate
you have
this?
to fix it. You have to. You're a lawyer.
Right. Yeah. So exactly. That's why I say to you, I don't think entrepreneurs are ever easy to deal with, right? But not from a personality perspective, but just that they're ambitious and sometimes they can get ahead of themselves, which is totally fine. I love that in them, and that's what makes them honestly successful.
Yeah.
However, you know, I was just talking to a VC yesterday about this. When they're sitting in front of a VC and asking for a lot of money, the VC wants to know the story. They want to see the full picture. They want to know what that journey's looked like from day 1 to day 20 or day 30 or day, 2 years down the track. And so it all has to make sense. And I think this is what entrepreneurs, if they can understand, will really make the entrepreneurial journey easier for them, is that everything that they do should tell a story. And the more clear that story is for a VC or anyone who's looking to invest in them can understand, the more likely they are going to get money and perhaps even more money.
Yeah.
And so it's really about how do they navigate this space? And I understand that money is often scarce on the journey, and time is important, but it's about balancing the two and understanding that this is a long game, not a short one. And how do we play the long game?
One of the main challenges that most of the startups and the entrepreneurs have is funding. And I understand that you've been working with many of them, with many entrepreneurs and startups in the region, and I'm pretty sure within your circle you have seen or you have access to some of the investors as well. I want to ask you if you handle that part, if they do help the entrepreneurs into securing or at least guiding them in how to secure this funding, and as well helping them with regulating the documents and the arrangement as well for agreeing on the funding at the same time.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I think you rightly said it. The founders are always trying to fundraise. And so many of them, in our circle are asking, where can I get funds from? Can you introduce us? And because we're very much in that ecosystem, we do have a lot of contacts. So for example, there's incubators, there's accelerators, there's hubs, and a lot of them have, accelerator programs where once you finish that cohort, could potentially invest in you, for example. And so we've got access to them. We also have access to VCs, we've got access to angel investment network. And so yes, when there is a founder who says, look, this is my business, this is my activity, I'm looking to raise funds, can you put me in the direction? It's only natural that part of what we do is to support them and encourage them to where to go to raise the funds. However, we're not focused on that as a business. At the end of the day, what we do well is the legal business. And so that's where, as you were saying, we would then handle all of the transactional investment documentation that needs to be negotiated with the investor and the founder. But we definitely do try and facilitate investment. And I'm currently on the board of 2022 Female Angels, which is a movement to really support and facilitate investment by female angel investors into female founders. So, when we're talking about founders raising funds, that's one thing, but then you've got the additional challenge of female founders raising funds, because we know that they're a lot less funded, for example. And so I'm currently in that, on the board there, and we're quite active in promoting, developing, encouraging, and really facilitating the chance for female founders to showcase themselves and to receive funding from hopefully other female angel investors. And so we have regular pitch nights. It's like once a month, and we do it all over the UAE and mostly in Dubai, but also over the UAE. And we really encourage the facilitation of that communication and support.
That will take me to the next question. When you actually help them or guide them rightly to secure the funding, and now there's an investor or there's a VC who is ready to put money into the project. Your work basically is to protect the entrepreneur and the startup, and with a lot of focus to secure the funding and make sure that their shares are not diluted and they are actually supported for the agreed amount of time. Who's taking the part of the investor? Who's protecting the investor against the failure of the founders or the startup in general?
Okay, so as a lawyer, sometimes I wear two hats. So I can either, it depends who's instructing us. It's either the startup and the founders, or the company, not the individual founder themselves. And then, of course, there's the investor. So sometimes as well, we wear the investor hat or have to advise them on their investment into a company. So we do both. However, we don't do them at the same time, so we're not conflicted.
Yes.
When you're asking the question of, for example, an investor and how it protects their investment into that company. So the idea is that they would have their own lawyer who would be negotiating and helping them to understand the documentation that they're using or entering into with that company. Now, how do they protect themselves? Well, they protect themselves through the legal agreement, and it all depends on what investment agreement and how they're funding that startup or company.
Yeah.
So it might be, for example, a safe note. Now, if it's a safe note, which we call a simple agreement for future equity, that's quite easy in a sense that it's a template document, came out of, Y Combinator. You make a few adjustments to it, but really the two main things you're going to be negotiating on that is the valuation of the company and the amount that you're willing to invest. All the other terms pretty much are quite standard. If there is something that you want to add to that, then you will. However, at the early stage of an investment, it's expected, if you're an angel investor or really investing in the early stages, that you would use this document. And essentially what that means is you don't have much say in the company at all until that safe note converts. And typically it converts at an equity financing round, right? Which is a priced round and doesn't happen often to a Series A. So it could be 12 to 18 or 24 months down the track of the life cycle of that business. So when you're talking about protect your interests, there's not really much to protect there because you're not a shareholder and you're not going to be active in the life cycle of that business until you are a shareholder and you have any say. However, typically when you're investing on a safe note, for example, you would get safe preferred shares. And those rights associated with the safe preferred shares just follow and are the same as whatever rights are going to be negotiated by a lead investor in a priced round. So really, if you're an angel investor investing in a very early stage on a note, for example, a safe note, not much interest to protect there. There's not really much to do there or to negotiate until subsequent rounds where perhaps you reinvest or now want to become a more active shareholder in the business and actually have a say, or for example, negotiate to have a board seat. But other than that, you're going to be very much a passive investor.
What I wanted to ask for, maybe you will give us a little bit of more clarity on that, especially on the angel investor side, is what kind of questions they should ask when they are trying to get into a certain investment. And they say, okay, there must be a due diligence phase and there must be some questions that they ask. What are the most important questions that an angel investor should put on the table in front of the entrepreneur, the founder, to ask them to build my trust into your project? That's how I put money. What are these questions, for example?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about an angel investor, typically they come in at the really early stages of a business. And so at that stage, the due diligence is not very detailed or extremely thorough because really the startup doesn't have much. So what are the key questions that an investor would ask? The first, in my view, and speaking, and obviously through the Entrepreneurial Journal, speaking with other angel investors and even VCs, they always look at the founders. How solid are the founders, the vision, the track record of being able to set up and build and scale something like this. They want to look at the mindset of the founder. So a lot of due diligence is actually on the person that they're going to be investing in, because really when you're in early stage, apart from the founder and maybe a few other employees and a great product, what are you investing in?
The idea.
So yeah, exactly, the idea. So first it's, who are the founders? And that's after obviously they're sold on the idea.
Yeah.
But then of course they look at what is the business plan? What is, how robust is the business model? What is the vision and what is the plan? And perhaps how does this founder is going to maybe pivot if, say, for example, the landscape changes and the idea is great today, but now your competitor's doing it at a lot faster pace than what you're doing it at. Maybe you need to pivot to get a competitive advantage. How are you going to do that? So looking at the, I guess, robustness of the business model, but also the agility to pivot in the times that we're in, knowing that technology space is moving so quickly. Yeah. So they look at that as well. And then of course they look at, well, what does the 12 to 18 months look like? Who is this founder planning to raise from? What are the revenues that they're going to be generating? How quickly can they go to market with this idea and generate some revenues? Because the quicker that a founder or company can scale, the quicker it is that they're going to be getting any return. And an angel investor knows or should know that the life cycle and where you're really going to be getting any real growth and return on your investment looks about 5 to 10 years. And so you want to start that journey as quickly as you can to get them to a place where they can really scale. And so I think there are the three really main things to look at, as an angel investor in the early stages. The business model and what that's going to look like, the founders, because they're going to be driving the business, and the plan for at least the next 12 to 8 months about how you're going to hit the road and start to scale operations.
You prefer this job or the public prosecutor?
Oh my God, they both had their challenges.
Yeah.
And they were both so fun, so different and so fun. I don't know if I prefer one to the other. I think it's just, I'm in a different journey now and this is what I'm doing and I'm enjoying it. And for as long as I continue to enjoy it, I'll keep doing it. And the day that I don't, I think I have to stop.
I know you're very active with public speaking, with the law, with entrepreneurs and startups. And I know you have a new project that you're working on right now. If you can give me a little bit of background about this project.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So at the moment, we're actually putting together a course for startups and entrepreneurs. Now, we understand that they need law, but may need lawyers' support, but may not always be able to afford lawyer support. So what we've done is we've taken all of the knowledge, all of that experience that we've, worked for so many years, as I said, over 450 startups over the 6 years, both in and outside the region. And we've taken their entire experience and are packaging it in a way that an entrepreneurial startup can literally do this self-paced online course and understand the entire journey of a startup and entrepreneur from the incorporation all the way through to an exit. And so it's 6 modules. I pretty much have curated the knowledge and information myself, so I deliver it through videos, but we also have a lot of experts that are coming on and talking about, specific areas of law or fundraising or IP or, protecting their interest and scaling and all of those, very important matters that startups need to be aware of. And I guess what the course is designed to do is equip startups with the ability and the knowledge so that when they're sitting with a lawyer or sitting with a VC or sitting with another founder, for example, negotiating a co-founder deal, that they understand exactly what it is that they need to be looking for. And now they've gone from a place of they don't know what they don't know to a place of they know what they know and they know what they need to be asking for the things that they don't know. And I think so it's really empowering to be in a place of education and to have at least a knowledge base that you're not starting up with an overwhelm of, even when we talked about incorporation, where do I set up? So this course is really designed to help them have a holistic overview, but as well as really get them to focus on exactly what they need to be able to, successfully navigate the entrepreneurial landscape.
Wow, I think this is really much needed because a lot of entrepreneurs are coming with the commercial idea or with the startup idea very enthusiastic and active. And you want to do it, but there are a lot of bits and pieces of the details, the small problems, the small tricks that they need to learn about it. And
we literally cover the entire journey. So everything in fundraising, what you can expect the investors to be looking for and what they expect to ask. We go through looking at, what does different terminology mean? There's all this terminology that is so foreign to a founder who's not, studied law, for example, and now has to be looking at an investment agreement and talking about, to investors about all these different investor rights. And so it's just really breaking down the the common terms and concepts and things that they will absolutely have to know throughout the journey. Yeah.
Wow. I'm so looking forward to that. I will
Thank you.
try to take this course because it's
Yes.
very interesting. I think the knowledge in general, sharing your knowledge with the public, it's a really remarkable thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today. We
You're very
really enjoyed
welcome.
the
It's been a
conversation.
pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very
for
much.
having me.
This is your dose from Monday Legal. See you next week.